Hey guys, so I'm not there today, but I thought that this would be a good way to still get the notes to you guys. So yesterday we talked about World War I, we talked about the causes, right? Mania, militarism, alliances, nationalism, imperialism, and the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So at this point, Europe is involved in this gigantic war, right? A war of a scale that we've never, ever seen before. But even though that all of Europe is involved in this, America is still separated. We have not gotten involved. We are isolated, as you would call it. So historically, besides that little tiny era of imperialism that we just got done studying, besides that, historically America has been a very isolated country. We really don't get involved in a lot of other people's stuff, and we can trace this all the way back to George Washington warning us to stay out of foreign affairs, right? So America's extremely isolated. One of the reasons that Woodrow Wilson, remember he's the president at this time, wants to stay out of wars because a lot of Americans are disagreeing on what side to enter in. We have a lot of English people in our country. We have a lot of French people. We have a lot of German people, right? So multiple people are going to have multiple opinions on what side to get involved in, and Woodrow Wilson sees it as easier to just stay out of it. The war, war's expensive. War will alienate some people who feel like we entered in the wrong side. So Woodrow Wilson's going to campaign when he runs for re-election, actually, to stay out of the war. As you can see here, here's a couple of his pins, right? One of these campaign pins: War in Europe, Peace in America, God bless Woodrow Wilson, right? And he's going to try to stay isolated for as long as possible until some events that are out of his control eventually pull us in. So we'll talk about these images in just a second. But what Germany begins to utilize is a technique called unrestricted submarine warfare. And that's a very important phrase, one that you should underline and star in your notes. Unrestricted submarine warfare is something that the Germans are going to begin to use. Remember, they have submarines, they have U-boats. This is the first major war where U-boats are going to be utilized. And previously, during wartime and stuff, when someone was about to sink another ship, they would approach, they would give warning, and they'd give the people on the other ship that's about to be sunk time to get off the ship and get into lifeboats and paddle away so they're less likely to die. Germany's going to say, forget that, this is wartime, and they're just going to start blowing up all the ships they come into contact with, right? They don't care if it's a warship or a merchant ship or a passenger ship. They're just going to start sinking everybody. We really don't like that, and it starts to affect Americans with the sinking of the Lusitania. A super huge ship, kind of the size of the Titanic, is going to be sunk by a German U-boat in 1915. This affects us. Even though the Lusitania is an English ship, it did have Americans on board, and 130 Americans are going to die when the Germans sink the Lusitania. This is not good for Woodrow Wilson, right? Prior to this, he's like, I don't know who to choose, no one's done anything to us. All of a sudden now the Germans are killing Americans. It's not a good look. Woodrow Wilson gets angry and he says, listen, Germany, that really wasn't cool. You're going to need to apologize. America's getting angry. They're going to want something to be done. But before we can approach Germany and have them, formally apologize and decide to, stop sinking stuff, they actually sink another ship. And this is a French vessel. So notice that these aren't American ships. If they had been sinking American ships, we would have had a whole nother problem on our hands. But they sink the Lusitania, which is an English ship, and then they sink the Sussex, which is a French ship. And with that, America finally issues a warning to Germany. And we say, you need to apologize. You need to apologize for sinking the ships. You need to apologize for killing Americans, and you need to promise that you'll stop using unrestricted submarine warfare. The Sussex and Germany agrees, right? The Sussex Pledge is an agreement between the Americans and the Germans, and America sees it as, okay, we've been apologized to. Germany knows they can't do that anymore. And Germany says, okay, yeah, sure, all we have to do is say that we won't do it anymore and America won't join. And that's definitely their goal. Germany does not want America to get involved, especially now that they know that America will not be joining the war on their side. Okay, so unrestricted submarine warfare, a huge issue in World War I that's going to bring us a little bit closer. The second major cause of of the United States getting involved in World War I is the Zimmermann telegraph. Okay, so this is the actual Zimmermann telegraph, all these little numbers and stuff. But if we look at the transcription, right, the translation as to what it means, this is a secret note sent from Germany to Mexico. And you can see right here it says, we intend to begin on the 1st of February unrestricted submarine warfare. All right, so the Germans lied. They're now telling Mexico, hey, just so you know, we're going to start using unrestricted submarine warfare again. Then they say in the next sentence, we shall endeavor in spite of this to keep the United States out of America, United States of America neutral. In the event of this not succeeding, we make Mexico a proposal of alliance on the following basis. Make war together, make peace together, generous financial support, and an understanding on our part that Mexico is to reconquer the lost territory in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. Okay, what does that all mean? The Zimmermann telegraph is a promise from Germany to Mexico saying, hey, team up with us, fight against the United States with us, and when we win, you get all the land that they took from you. Right, now this sounds crazy. Why would Mexico want to do this? But if you remember towards the end of the imperialism unit, when we were talking about Latin America, America and Mexico have some really high tensions at this point. Pancho Villa and the federal troops that Wilson was sending all over the place, right? There's a lot of tension between America and Mexico. So it's actually really smart of Germany to proposition Mexico in this way, because there's a potential that they'd actually take the bait. So, it says right here, yeah, secret message, proposes an alliance, exactly. But we intercepted the Zimmermann telegraph, right? The telegraph sent from Germany to Mexico. America intercepts it. We find out what they're planning, and we are angry. Right? We're also angry that they decide that they're going to continue to use unrestricted submarine warfare. That was the one thing that kept us from getting involved earlier. Now we find out that not only are they going to start doing that again, but now they're also making plans in case we decide to join. In the same way that the De Lome letter brought us closer and closer to the Spanish-American War, remember a lot of Americans were really angry, the Zimmermann telegraph is going to bring us closer to World War I. And once we find out about the Zimmermann telegraph, and remember, already unrestricted warfare is now back on the table, Woodrow Wilson has to decide what to do, and he finally makes the decision to go to war, to ask Congress to declare war on Germany. And I put this quote back up here for us to remember that Woodrow Wilson was all about moral diplomacy, right? Mission diplomacy, the idea of making the world safe for democracy. And at this point, we as Americans don't feel like Germany's allowing us to feel secure and safe. So with that, in April 1917, Congress is going to officially declare war on Germany, and that is when America officially enters the war on the Allied side. Now, this little box, it's important to note that when Germany sent the Zimmermann telegraph, right, I'm sure they didn't predict that it would be intercepted, but they knew that the second they started utilizing some unrestricted submarine warfare, America was going to join the war. But the Germans decided, they took a calculated risk, they took a gamble, and they decided that they thought that if we did enter into war with the Germans, the Germans believed that they would be able to defeat the Europeans in Europe, specifically on the Western Front, before the United States was able to mobilize. Now, what does that mean, to mobilize? Germany thought it was going to take us a long time to get all of our troops, to get all of our supplies, to get all of our tanks and ships and guns and flamethrowers and all that stuff over to Europe where the actual fighting is happening. And that's a pretty, safe bet. America's huge. We didn't have, a humongous standing army at this time, so we had to come up with people to fight. We had to get those people over there. We had to get all our supplies over there. So it was a calculated risk. However, it did not pay off for the Germans. We actually mobilized like rapidly fast, freakishly fast, and part of that was because we'd been, supplying weapons and stuff to the Allies for quite a while. At this point, which helped us mobilize quicker. And Germany, took a calculated risk and lost that bet. So when I ask you on a quiz or a test for the causes of the United States entering the war, right? We're talking about mania and stuff. That's the causes of the actual war. When we're talking about the causes of the United States entering the war, that's different. Right, so yes, the Lusitania, the Sussex Pledge, those things all brought us closer, but the major cause is unrestricted submarine warfare, right? The Germans sinking random ships, no matter if they are civilian or military, without any kind of warning. We don't believe that represents who us as Americans think, the free trade of the ocean should be. And the second major cause is the Zimmermann Telegraph. Right? The idea that Germany's now trying to form alliances with our neighbors and they're going to begin to use unrestricted warfare again. So those two causes are what bring America into the war. And here we see, some pictures of some American soldiers. In World War I, American soldiers are called doughboys, right? And we're going to draft nearly 3 million doughboys into service and ship them off over to Europe. These men usually, take in, a couple months of training and then they're sent to the front lines. It's important to remember that at this point, Europe has been in war for years, right? The French, the British, the Germans have been sitting in this Western Front trenches for years. But the Americans show up and we're feeling super froggy, we're invigorated, we've got fresh legs, and we kind of pour into the trenches and really turn the tides of the war. We give the Allies the final oomph that they've been needing to help win the war. And within just a few short months of America entering the war is going to end. And of course that ends with an Allied victory. We win the war. A couple other things to note. Japan's going to join in just for the last couple months of the war, just like us. And Italy's going to technically join us instead of the other side, even though they were in a pre-war alliance with Germany. They just had too many issues going on with Austria-Hungary, and they picked the Allies, right? They sat there and waited till the final minute, saw who was going to win, and picked that side. Cool. We'll look at that when I come back. Last thing I want to talk about is this guy right here, Frank Buckles. You may or may not have heard of Frank Buckles, but he's famous as being the last surviving World War I veteran. Okay, so he fought in World War I. Out of everyone on all sides, out of the entire world, he is the last person to finally pass away who actually fought in the war. He was 110 years old when he died, the second oldest American in the country at that point. Born in 1901, lived until 2011. Now, why am I telling you this? Why do we care about this dude? Yeah, it was cool he fought, but why is this important? First of all, I bet you never thought that you were alive at the same time as someone who fought in World War I, right? We're not talking about like World War II with Hitler and stuff. We're talking about World War I, right? A long time ago. But you were, because unless some of you have had like freakish growth spurts, none of you were born after 2011, right? So you were alive at the same time as this guy. But why is that important? It's important to remember that we're talking about these dates that seem like so long ago, and they were, but not really, because these people who lived in this generation are still, around today. And yeah, he was the last veteran to fight because he was, 16, 17 around the time of the war, but there are plenty of other people who grew up with World War I as their childhood. So yes, it was a long time ago, but the people of World War I are still around today, which means that they're people just like you and me. We talk about, millions of troops, we look at these pictures of these doughboys, this guy right here, right? Just like an anonymous person, right? But it's important to remember that they're people just like us. All right, that's it for today. I miss you guys so much. I will see you on Monday. Bye, guys.